Okay, welcome to the OSEHRA Working Group meeting for February 12th, 2020. We are going to be looking at a demonstration of the VAPALS system from the user side. And we will be talking about how our go live is going. And then finally, after that, we will be talking about what is going to be happening next because of OSEHRA shutting down. So I think, unless there are any objections, we'll just go right into the demo that Matt is going to present for us.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Matthew King, and what I want to show today is some of the new features that we have in the VAPALS system. And the last time I think we showed this, if the patients were preloaded in the system, and you could find a patient, and then you could go ahead and enroll them, register them into the program. And here I'm looking up a patient by the name of Fur that isn't in the system. And so I have another option now called manual registration. And this can be done in systems that don't have any patients at all in them. And if they do have patients, there's also a matching section that allows you to do some patient merges, which we may or may not talk about this time anyway. So this is the manual registration system, and we have a new patient, and we'll just call him Douglas Fur, and we'll do a date of birth and gender. The thing about this is if you're trying to register a patient that already has a known Social Security number, it won't allow you to do that. Now, of course, it will allow you to register patients under the same name because that's fairly common, but that's where the matching later might come into. So we'll just find one that hasn't been used yet and submit. And once you do that, you can see that this patient was successfully entered into the system. So if we go back to the home page up here on the upper right, and we now look for Mr. Fur, we will find Douglas. There he is. And so if we want to register him, we put submit. You sure you want to put him here? Yes, we are. And so that takes you directly to the intake form. And as you know, this intake form is really divided into three main sections. And you could, under non-ideal circumstances, I would say, get three notes on a patient. One, just the fact that there was a referral. In this case, we're going to say the patient was self-referred, say yes. And you could submit this now and just later run and see what patients were actually put into the system. The second part is called pre-enrollment discussion, which does not need to happen if the patient's right in front of you. So we're going to go ahead and pretend this patient showed up a couple days ago in person. And then the next thing you want to do is and this is a mandatory field, is verify their primary address. And I think I'll just use something here. It is not the county. County is actually Granville. And Butner, North Carolina, which is where I am right now. And once you get the zip in there, it allows, there's something that allows you to know if this is a rural address or not based on the zip code. And that can be overwritten here if it turns out to be wrong. And then the telephone number, something else in here. And so now we're into the third section of the form, which is really asking more clinical data. This could be a current smoker that's willing to quit. Yes, they're willing to quit. How many cigarettes a day? Let's say they smoke a lot. They need to smoke a lot to actually get into this program, and there can be a quit date or not a quit date. I don't think I'll put one in this time. And if that was, and also if there was a lung, any kind of lung cancer diagnosis could be put in here. And if there was any prior CT scan, lung CT scans, you could enter those as well, and their locations. This is another mandatory field because you want to have a decision-making process that involves both you and the patient about this screening program. And then we're going to say that the veteran has opted to join the program, and the clinical indications for this is that the patient is a heavy smoker. And then we're going to go into active enrollment, and maybe he's got an appointment tomorrow for a CT screening. And you can see we've got great spill check too. So that is pretty much what we've got. And you notice that the system has calculated the cumulative pack years, and that's going to be forwarded now to subsequent forms as we fill them out. And we can submit the application or the form. And this is the actual note itself. And this note is designed to go into Vista or any other electronic health system. And it, I believe that when we talk about Phoenix and their go live, we'll talk about how this note's going to get into their system. So, and once we're there, then we can go on to the next patient depending on what your job is. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and pretend we're the radiologist now, or the radiology department, and we're going to do the low dose CT screening. So we're creating a new form. Let's say this is yesterday, and you can put a person in there. And clinical information, all we know is that this patient is a smoker, right? So we can include that in the impression later on, though, as you can see, just by making that checkbox. And this is the very first exam in this series that we know about. So we're going to mark that as the baseline exam. And there are some criteria about what is a baseline or not, and it will tell you about that. And this is a low dose CT, and we're going to use this thickness. And to be honest, I have no idea what these fields are here, so I'm just going to leave them blank. And then we get to the nodule section, which is right here, and there's some criteria that we can read about how to fill these out, but I'm just going to go ahead and add the first nodule. And it correctly says it's newly seen because this is the first one. And this is whether or not it's found in the endobronchial area, which we're going to say no. Most of the time they're not. And we'll say this is in the left upper lobe. And I'm just going to say that this is one, and it's seen in these images, and I'm just making this stuff up. But when I put these in a certain way, it helps me sort of identify which nodules were entered first and stuff like that. And we don't know the status of this nodule, But we do know from the look on the CT that it's a solid nodule. And then we'll just make some things up here about the size of it. And it can calculate the volume for you if you give it those three things. This is a closed field because it's totally solid. It's not part solid. If it was semi-solid, then it would want to know the length and width of the solid part. And you can give some other characteristics of the nodule right here by making these checks. And then if you want to identify it so people can know what you're talking about, you can say, well, it's 4 millimeters from the costal pleura. And in this action, I'm just going to make something up. We'll say a follow-up CT, and we're going to call this comment 1 on the CT eval. And then I'm going to add another nodule, and this is another one here. And I'm not going to put it in the bronchial area. We'll make it in a completely different location. So we're going to call this 2. I'm going to call this 2, 3. And again, it's an unknown status, but it's solid. And let's make this bigger. The reason I'm making it bigger is because if you were reading the instructions up above, it likes to put the biggest solid one first. So we have a method that when we sort these, it will sort them correctly, even if you just put them in as you see them. So we can say we're going to do that. And we're going to call this comment 2 on the CT eval. And then well, that's all we're going to do for there. And that's obviously a very important section for the screening. But there's other sections too. In fact, there's quite a few other sections. You can look at this and decide how much emphysema and what the coronary artery calcifications look like. And the best way to do that is actually by looking at the 4 watershed areas, and this will calculate a score for you automatically when you do that. And you can put in the other abnormalities as well. Maybe we saw a cyst here. Maybe we saw some apical scarring bilaterally, that sort of thing. Actually, there's quite a bit of things like that. And again, if you want to move this into the impression, then you can call this the pulmonary impression. So pleura, there could be some rounded atelectasis in the right lower lobe. Let's give ourselves a pleural effusion, none in the right, small in the left. We can include pleural comments in here as well. And cardiac, we can give ourselves some cardiac calcifications. You can go through and do a bunch of different things in there. We can leave this one off here. Let's say that we did see the thyroid and there was a nodule there, small one. Maybe there's something going on in the thymus. You can do stuff with lymph nodes, which I'm going to skip for right now, because and we can say that there's something going on here. Maybe there's a hiatal hernia. Maybe it's like 3 centimeters. And we can put comments here for abdomen, abdominal, and breasts can have some mass or cysts. You can call the actual parts of this. etc. Uh-oh, where was I here? Oh, this must have been esophagus. Okay.
You can see right
So,
above it says neck and
yeah.
mediastinal abnormalities
We're in the mediastinum.
above the
Okay.
comments.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll just leave it there
Yeah.
for now. Okay, so finally we get to the impression, and it's going to be nodules as described. And then you can say other abnormalities as found in suggested follow-up, and you can also create some impressions here. And then you can get to this category, put some modifiers on, and let's say that we want an annual repeat, and maybe we want something else, and then we can submit. And now this is where you're going to see that the nodules are sorting now because I didn't put them in from the biggest to smallest. And now we can generate the report just by looking at it here. And what you'll find is that you've got your nodules that come out, the location, the different descriptions that we put in there. You'll notice that this is comment 2 is the first one because it's actually a bigger one than this one. And so this is comment 1. So it did sort properly. And you got your apical scarring, and you have your impressions and stuff have all come in to the note that the way we want it. And then in the impression section, you get the nodules as described above. It brings in the coronary calcification score and gives you a little blurb about that because it's high. And then you got your moderate and emphysema and things like that. Now, I think that George actually on some systems has made this a little more compact, but everything's coming in the way it's supposed to be coming in. And your follow-up is here, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah, let me make a comment here on this new format
Sure.
of our CT Val report. We up till what was it, 2 weeks ago, or very recently, the CT Val report was coming out, and it was based in HTML, and there were big bold, there were HTML kind of formatting of this report on this page that you would see, and the formatting would have bold headings and some HTML formatting, and when trying to use that in the VA, because the purpose of doing this report is to help the radiologist write the report about the evaluation of the scan, and so this is meant to be an input to their report. They use PowerScribe, which is a very fancy editing system, radiology report editing system, and they have templates, report templates inside PowerScribe. So what was really needed is that we generate the content kind of as raw text, so they could be easily copied and put into the PowerScribe system, and then run through the PowerScribe template into the report. And so that's been a major change we did in the last couple of weeks, is to take the problem was that the PowerScribe and templates that were being used in the VA were having a lot of trouble with the HTML formatting that we were putting into the report. So we scrambled and took out all the HTML, and then grouped a lot of the generated text in the same groupings that that are in the that are wanted for the report. So this is I would characterize this. It's not a formatted text report, obviously. It's a we don't do any we leave it to PowerScribe to do things like word wrapping and things like that. But this is what I would call raw text. So this is the raw text that would be an input to the PowerScribe system that assists the radiologist in creating the report that then gets filed into Vista for the scan.
Right, and it's become much more compact. Like some of these things used to be like 4 lines, and now they're on 1 line or something like that. So
right,
it's in a more compact form.
Have they tried it through the PowerScribe, the new format through the PowerScribe system in the VA?
Well, they have, but they're still having some formatting issues. So we're still trying to figure out
okay, well,
how to address those. Yep.
Let me know anything we could do, because we tried to match the the formatting in the samples you gave us, and we're trying to provide raw text so that when you copy it and paste it into PowerScribe, it's all ready to go through the PowerScribe templates.
Okay, shall I do a follow-up on this patient? Or
yeah,
do you
we probably should explain the workflow a little bit here. So we've done an intake on a patient. We did manual entry on the patient to be able to do the intake. We produced intake notes, which would be copied and pasted into CPRS. And so there would be TIU notes right now in this patient's record in CPRS, having been copied and pasted in when we did the, and yes, you can display, always go back and display the note that was generated. That's permanently kept, a copy's kept here, but the idea is that the nurse navigator, when they did the intake, would copy that note and then paste it into CPRS to populate a TIU note for the patient. And then the work went to the radiologist, where they did a reading on the CT scan that was done, and they filled out, as Matt demonstrated, they filled out the CT evaluation form, and were able to generate the raw text for their radiology report, which then they would copy that and paste that into their PowerScribe system, and it would go through the PowerScribe template and through the radiology package into the Vista system. So that should now be present at this point in time in the Vista system. And now the next step is we go back to the nurse navigator. So we went from the nurse navigator to the radiologist. Now we're going to go back to the nurse navigator, and the nurse navigator is going to since we have a follow-up, a CT scan done, is going to communicate the results of the CT scan to the patient, and going to document the results. Document the results in a note that will be generated and put into the patient's record. So this is the new follow-up form. In the new follow-up form, there's 2 different formats to it. It serves dual purposes. The first is just for communication. If you didn't have a CT scan results to document for the patient, but you did have a discussion with the patient about their smoking, you can select the first radio box there. And then and what options you get on the form are very much dependent on which of these 2 boxes you check. And in fact, you can only get one of 2 different types of note. You're either going to get a communication note, or you're going to get a CT
follow-up note.
Right.
Yeah.
So we should definitely do the CT follow-up note for this demo.
Right. So that's the second radial button here,
Mm-hmm.
and you can put this in. It will calculate the time since the baseline, and as you can see, that was a couple days ago. And then you're going to put who this was ordered by and the national provider number. And there was documentation of shared decision making on that first one. And patient was a current smoker. And the reported pack years actually are right down here, 30. And of course, that hasn't changed much because it's just been a couple of days. So you can put the reported pack years here. And they really haven't had any time since they quit. Let's say they were asymptomatic at time of order. Reason for the scan was a heavy smoker. And have you taken antibiotics? Is this your annual? No, because it's the first one, right? The baseline. And then it asks for some symptoms that are associated, that could be associated with lung cancer. And let's say that the patient didn't have any of those, so they didn't see a physician for them. And when did you have your most recent one? Obviously, just a few days ago. Have you ever been hospitalized in the past? I'm just going to answer no, no, and NA to these questions. Again, it's getting to the idea of they already have had some pulmonary insults, particularly cancer. And then the smoking history. Now, if this had been a while, and we filled this in, you would see that this would automatically get calculated and put in here for us. So the math is done, which is very nice.
So let's comment right on that table. That
yes.
table, because people are enrolling in this program for multiple years. They're going to be scanned annually or more often over multiple years. And if this was a person who has been in the program for a number of years, then this table would include each of the times when we talk to them about smoking. It was starting with the intake form, as this one does, and then every follow-up form would have its own line here. and then what information we got about their smoking at that follow-up would be used to increment the number of cumulative pack years that they initially had reported on intake, so that we have a more current estimate of their cumulative pack years. So this is our first follow-up on this test patient. So this table is small, but very within a period of time, this table will be larger and is consistent. This table is shown on a number of different reports, and it is also generated into the notes, so that we are maintaining a consistent methodology for computing the cumulative pack years for each patient.
Right, and it can take into account quit dates and restart dates and all sorts of things. I really think it's a great little table. It's very well done. Have you smoked cigarettes, even a puff? Well, let's just say yes. And then see, this is where it's going to ask about that. How many did you smoke a day? And if there was a quit date, and let's just say there isn't. And you'll notice that doesn't have too much, but next time that we go to a table like this, instead of saying 30, it's going to say 30.01. So you try to quit smoking, let's say yes. Oh, maybe we've tried twice. Maybe we did a cold turkey, and maybe we did a telephone hotline. And yeah, I'm thinking about quitting. So, so the last CT was yesterday, and let's say the person's standing right in front of me here, and I'm not going to order a new one, and I don't think we need to send them to pulmonary either. So we're going to go ahead and submit. Now, if I haven't filled out everything, it'll come back and tell me, and actually I I meant to leave a mandatory field open, because what'll happen if you leave a mandatory field open, it'll highlight it in red and it'll roll back to that field for you. In this case, I managed to fill the form out. And so here's the note. And again, this note is, well, George can talk about the formatting. I guess he already has. So.
Well, this is, again, this is the similar format to the intake note. It's meant to be copied and pasted into CPRS as a TIU note. Or if we get, once we get the HL7 communication working between this system and the VA systems, then the note would be automatically sent into the patient's record.
Right.
But this is the follow-up note that communicates the results of the CT scan. Now, there are some things on that note.
Oh, do you want me to go back?
Not done with the note yet.
Sorry, I'll go back to it.
This is I did a lot of fancy programming here. I want to talk about it.
Sure, I don't blame you.
So yeah, just click on the note. Yeah, that's it. Just a note.
Right here?
Nope, the note is below it.
Let me just
go back to the case review.
Okay.
See, you can't submit. You don't get two notes. Look at the
this one already exists. Okay, so
yeah. You only get one note from a follow-up form. That's it. And if you try to make another one, it gives you this error message. And there's the note.
So it's this one right below it. Yeah,
yep, exactly.
My bad.
That's the note. It gives you the date and the whole thing. Now, some of the things that are in this note came from the follow-up form you just filled out. You know, some of it is the smoking history that we have in that table, but made into a form that could be put into a note. But there's two sections of this note which are actually pulled from the CT valve form. So you remember the radiologist filled out a form, and one of the things that was included were the impressions, and the other things that were included in the CT valve form were recommendations. Now you'll notice we didn't fill out any recommendations or.
Well, there are some down here.
Well, no,
annual
but
repeats.
When we filled out the follow-up form, you were not required to fill those out.
I see.
The nurse navigator did not have to fill out that information on the follow-up form.
Right.
Why? Because the system went back and found the CT valve report that this follow-up is pertaining to, and pulled those sections out of the report and included them in the note. So this is a way that we're leveraging, right, the information captured captured from the radiologist into the CT valve form, and then we're including it in the patient's as a TIU note in the patient's record. So this is a kind of a fancy note, and honestly, if I imagine in real situations, the impressions would be more robust. And there's actually, you could have actually some substantial note that reflects what was done in the CT valve report, as well as what was captured in follow-up.
Right.
Yes. So it's a fancy note.
Mm-hmm. It's very nice.
And it's a cut and paste into CPRS to create a TIU note. Thank you, Matt, for that.
Sure. What I wanted to do was before I jumped the gun a little bit, I was going to go to a patient that has actually quite a few notes and history. And here's, this first one. You can see there's been a lot done on this patient, and some are PET evals, there's backgrounds, there's follow-ups, and I don't know the best way to show this, but as you go through these, the nodules will be updated, obviously, as they keep looking at them. Some may resolve, some may become larger, some may become smaller. And so you'll see the nodule report on one of these earlier ones. And what happens when you fill out a new one is that those nodules that from the very last report will come in kind of as is but modifiable. So where it firstly said newly seen, it's not going to say that anymore because you're going to have to make a comment. And then you'll see that this now has 5 nodules, where that one I showed you before I think only had 2 or 3. And the descriptions have changed too. So those things change. And then the other thing, I think, if we look at this background here, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the table, a table to show that smoking history.
Oh, okay, a follow-up. Just go to a follow-up.
Here's a follow-up right here.
Yep.
Let me go to the form itself. Yeah, here's a table with a lot more follow-ups on it, as you can see. That sometimes if they're done very close together, there's not much added, and they quit smoking, but it will go and add accordingly. So what else should we take a look at?
Well, Arjit, what have we not talked about that we probably should have? In terms of the new features and how this works.
I think you've hit most of the points.
Why don't we do a new form for this patient and have it be a biopsy form, and that way you'll show the nodules being pulled in.
Okay. So was biopsy performed? I hate to say yes, because look at this, it gets ugly. But here it is. I'm just going to say no. And I'm going to say no to this too. And we didn't do any molecular testing, because what we really want to see are these nodules, right? And this is exactly what we're talking about. So here's all the nodules that have been pulled forward. Remember, there were 5 of them. They no longer have this first field done, because you know, this one maybe didn't have a change, this one maybe had a slight decrease. Let's say this went to 5, you know, this one maybe had a slight increase, maybe this went to 6. And by the way, after this happens, they don't resort, they only sort the first time by largest to smallest non-calcified. Later, if one of them outgrows another one, it still stays in the same location. And then you can say no change here. And then you can put your actions, your new actions, whatever you're going to do. I'm just making this stuff up, obviously. And I can submit.
All right.
And
now
so
there's the biopsy. There's the biopsy report down there. Now let's say, and this is probably not a realistic thing, but let's say there was a PET scan that was ordered for this patient.
Okay, let's go to the PET eval, create a new form. We can do today's date, can fill out this, whatever this is. We'll say no. Data baseline CT. Now, I don't really remember what that was on this patient, so I'm just going to put something in there. Date of most comparison. Again, I don't know these dates, George. I have to go back to the deal, but I'll just say.
Well, the important thing we're going to show is that we've copied the nodules in, and that basically the nodules that we're copying in are the ones you just modified in the biopsy.
There we go. Yeah. So this one, I think I changed from 5 to 6, and you can see that the changes I kind of forget what changes I made. I know one of them I changed from 5 to 6 or something like that, and but
Right.
they're
Well, this
they're
is
basically
the idea is to try to save work, to save the
yeah.
radiologist work. When they've got a lot of scans they have to evaluate, and they have to have things, and they don't. And if you can avoid, give them a way to have to not re-enter nodules that they have already entered and previously for the patient. That's the that's the idea of this pre-fill.
Right.
And and you know, and you want to go back to the last time, whenever the last time the radiologist looked at a picture, a picture from this patient, they updated the nodule grid, and so that becomes the current nodule grid. And so when a new form, one of the biopsy form or PET scan or a new CT valve form is created, those are the nodules that you want to be pulling in. So after you get done with this and submitting it, then we're going to go ahead and make a new CT valve form, and we'll see the latest modules being pulled in that you just modified.
Okay. I don't know what we want to modify here to remember. Let me modify a comment here and say this is from PET. What did we say today's date? 20. So okay, so now we do a new form. What were we going to do, a follow-up?
CT valve now.
Oh, CT. Oh, that's right, because we want to look at the nodules. Okay, so if we bring in the nodules now, you'll notice that I don't see that coming in, but
Well, it should have.
yeah.
All right, so we'll check that. I think obviously you wouldn't do a PET and then another CT valve on the same day.
This stuff here seems to come in, but that comment seems to be left over from the first one. So there we go. Anyway, we'll check that out.
Yep. So, Arden, have you had a chance to look at the copy forward at all?
Yeah, it looks like it's working. Well, I guess as you just demoed it, it looked fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good. Great. Yeah, so that's a new feature that we added, within the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And
well, so yeah, that's great. But we're running out of time here. I didn't know if we wanted to move on to some of the other things on the agenda, or if you still wanted to do some more here.
Well, let's ask. Anybody have any questions for Matt on the demo? That's a great demo. Thank you, Matt. That was good.
Thanks for the help, George.
It was my pleasure. I enjoyed it. So I think next thing on the agenda is to talk about the deployment.
Yes. I've been looking at, this is Rick, I've been looking at versions here. So we currently have, the current version of the main application is Screening Applications Management ELCAP version 18. And if I'm reading this, the kids distributions correctly, George, you'll have to let me know if I've got this right. There are 4 patches currently deployed at Phoenix.
Yes.
So the most recent one, the 4th patch, was the CT report in text format. Patch 3 before that, which was January 26th, was nodule copy for PET and biopsy, which we were just looking at. January 23rd was patch 2. That was intake note word wrapping and CT eval report typos. And then I don't have a description yet on what patch 1 was, but that was
patch
January
1 was the follow-up report and the follow-up. But that was we didn't have a follow-up note, so the new follow-up form, and both follow-up notes, both the CT reporting follow-up note and the communications follow-up note all came in patch 1.
Beautiful. Right. Okay. So that's where we were then. Do we know what's currently under development? You know, for patch 5.
Well,
What our priorities are for next?
well, you know, obviously, you know, Artit's on the line, and what he comes up with as, you know, in terms of problems needing to be fixed with the deployment, will take priority. You know, in terms of patch 5. But there's a couple of things we are looking at. One is an upgrade to the authentication. We want to do digest authentication in the system. So we want to make sure that people can enter their can use Chrome in the VA and can enter their access and verify code, so that on every page we will know who it is accessing the page, and we can prepare you know, prepare information for them on the page that is relevant to them. And that's a preparatory patch. It's a very important patch because it's a security patch, and but allows us excuse me, I'm sorry, allows us to ascertain identity of the user. We currently have authentication, but it uses what's called basic authentication in Chrome in the browser, and basic authentication is one that has been turned off inside the VA, which is why we're working on using the digest authentications, which is more secure and encrypted. So that's the next important patch, I think. Then we're also looking at a patch that will allow us to have multi-tenancy on the system, which means that, you know, because once we can ascertain exactly who the user is, we know what patients they should be allowed to see, and they should be allowed to see patients from their VA site. So we're working on a patch. I don't know if it's patch 6 or patch 7, but we're working on a patch to allow multi-tenancy, where multiple VA sites could use the same VAPALS server to enter patients into it, and to support their VA site. So we'd be able to use the same system, and depending on who you were, you would only get to see patients that were for your VA site.
Beautiful.
Okay. Any questions about that? Arta, is that something that we had talked a little bit about? That sound like something that would be useful?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure at what point we're gonna try signing up or you know, bringing it live for all the other sites, but you know, that is happening shortly. So.
Right. I'm sure it's. I mean, you know, again, software takes longer than, you know. You'd like to have the software in place by the time you want to put the next site up.
Right.
So the objective here is that the server that Artit maintains and administers inside the VA, we're thinking, what we're thinking is that by the way, we didn't mention, I think, that we distributed, we did a lot of work to get the VAPALS system working on cache instead of on YadaDB or GTM, which is what it's been working on for the last couple of years. But the desire was to have the system running on cache, because cache is on the TRM. And in particular, there's a particular version of cache that's on the TRM, and I forget what is it. Began with a 1.4 or something. I don't know. Don't remember the version. But the version of cache that's on the TRM is what we distributed to Artit, which has gone into production on the server in Phoenix. And the version he has, that's just setup he has there will be is the production version. What we're thinking about is that he would set up a second cache instance on that same server, but it would be a test system. And it'd be a test system where he would as these new patches come out, he could install them on his test system and make sure they work properly, and then install the same patch on the production system. And that then those would be the only two instances of the VAPALS server that he would need to have in order to support a number, and our projected number of VA sites. So all they would need to have is they need to have network connectivity to the server, and then we'd need to set up who the users are, and then which VA site they ought to have access to. So when if they do manual entry, that manual entry would go into the collection of patients from that VA site, and so we'd have multi-tenancy. When we send out new patches, they wouldn't have to be applied to 10 different servers. They could be applied first to the test server and then to the production server, and serve all 10 of the VA sites that we were planning to do.
That's a great plan. I like it.
Thank you. Art, did it sound right to you?
Definitely sounds like it would be easier than managing separate instances for each site. So I'm totally on board.
Cool. Yeah, I did not want it to be a burden for you to take upgrades and new features and having to go and manage patching all 10 sites, etc. I think it'll be a much better, and I think it'll make better use of the capacity, whatever server capacity you have already in the Phoenix server. So.
Okay, we're just about out of time, so I want to make sure we take a moment to mention how grateful we are to the hardworking staff of OSEHRA, who since the inception of this project have been hosting these calls and our JIRA website and our GitHub website and our discussion group for the working group. With the dissolution of OSEHRA coming up this Friday, we are moving those resources off, and we're going to manage them separately. World Vista and Vista Expertise Network and Paraxial will be taking over responsibilities of those things for this project. We will have a call next week, and we'll be distributing contact info to all the members of the working group so that we can continue these discussions. And one of the points of focus for next week's call will be to work with Ardit to establish versions, kind of where we are with all the different code bases that we manage. I'll have a report on that, and we'll want to have some discussion. So watch your email, everybody, for the invite for next week's call, same time. And I guess I turn it back to Linda to wrap up the call.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they want to share before we log off? Thanks a lot, guys. I think this went really well. I will put the recording of this up today, and we'll let everybody know who couldn't make it to the call that it is there so that they can watch it. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Matt. That was a great demo.
Great demo, Matt.